If you have ever considered moving to the Emerald Coast and you've not really narrowed down where you want to be, this is the perfect video for you. In fact, I would suggest grabbing a pen, some paper, and maybe something to drink, because I am going to do a full, very, very comprehensive guide so that you can make the most educated decision you can when moving to the Emerald Coast. What is going on? My name is Andrew. My team and I have helped well over 1,000 people move to the Emerald Coast. So we've got tons of insight for you, and we're going to try to break that down for you to the most important details you need to know in this video. So what exactly are we going to be talking about in this video? Well, the first thing we're going to go over is the different roads and intersections that are just tangled all along the Emerald Coast. The reason why we do this is because it's not talked about that often, and it could make a really big difference in your decision on which city to live in. And right after that, then we're going to go over the best areas to live in on the Emerald Coast. We're going to use a third-party system, so it's not my personal opinion. This is from niche.com and other websites like that to help determine what the best areas are. Then right after that, we're going to go into some pros and cons and some of my personal opinions on each of the cities as well. And lastly, the cost of living for each of those areas, because, well, you could fall in love with an area, but if it is outside of the amount of money you'd like to spend to move down here, then no, that doesn't really help you. So we want to make sure we're hitting all of those points so that you can make the most educated decision possible. So the first thing we're going to do is pull up a map, and we're going to go over all of the roads. Now make sure you stick here until the end when I give my opinions and some of the insights that you're not going to find anywhere else. But first, we need to talk about those roads. Now that we're on the subject of roads, we might as well start with the most popular one, the one that you will probably be on the most, and that is Highway 98. Highway 98 actually runs along the entire Emerald Coast, right smack dab through it, and it is the main road that you'll be going through. Everything from Pensacola down to Panama City Beach along the coastline is Highway 98. So when we're looking at the actual traffic patterns all the way from Pensacola to Panama City Beach, we're going to start on the west side and move our way east. This way you can kind of get an idea of which cities and what type of traffic they're going to have that you might have to deal with. So let's begin. Working along the west side and over, you're going to see some traffic start to build up around the Pensacola Beach area all the way into about Tiger Point, which is just a subsection of Gulf Breeze. This is mainly due to tourism, but it also has a little bit of traffic here, at least the last several years, because of the construction that they're doing. And as you guys probably know in your state, if there is some sort of construction going on, sometimes it lasts a lot longer than we think it will. They have been expanding Highway 98 to make sure that it allows for more traffic, which is a very good thing. But just note that the 10-mile stretch from Pensacola Beach all the way into, let's say, Navar, it's about 10 miles or so, and it generally takes about 15 to 20 minutes to get through. Now, continuing our trip into Navar, if you are driving through the Navar area, you'll notice that the traffic points hit at around Navar Beach, which is no surprise. Everybody wants to go to the beach, so that's where most of the congestion is. Now, the traffic will be on both sides of the road here in Navar. So when we're looking at Navar Bridge, both the east and westbound lanes are going to get a little bit busy during tourist season. But it is going to be fairly mild compared to most of the areas that I'm going to be talking about along 98. Generally, though, once you get onto Navar Beach, it does go considerably quicker because it's just a straight line shot for one light, and then you make a decision if you're going straight through to the pier, going left to another portion of the beach, or going right and heading down into Navar Beach, Maine, and then down into some of the little, hidden local areas that we like to go to down there. And if we continue heading east, we will have Hurlburt Field traffic. Now, Hurlburt Field is a military installation, home of the Air Force Special Operations Command, and so there tends to be a little bit of traffic there as some people are going into base. Now, the base there has two different access points, so both sides of the road can get busy, but you generally only notice the traffic from east to west, so from Fort Walton Beach-ish into Navar. There's a small period there where it can get a little bit backed up. This is actually one of my big complaints is I live in Mariester on the other side of Hurlburt Field. So you've got Hurlburt Field right here, you've got Mariester here, and then you've got my office here in Fort Walton Beach, and I've got to cross over that. So personally, I just don't do it from the hours of 3 to 6 p.m. on weekdays because it just takes my 14-minute drive and turns it into a 30-minute drive pretty quick, and that's just a little bit too much for me personally. I know, maybe I'm spoiled. But if you are headed west, as long as you're not in that 3:30 to 5:30 p.m. traffic, you're generally safe and you won't even notice that there's any slowdown. Now, the traffic in Fort Walton Beach can start at around Beale and sometimes even a little bit earlier, meaning a little bit further west of Beale. Although generally it's around Beale that you're going to start seeing it. So basically the downtown area of Fort Walton Beach. Once you get through downtown, get over the bridge onto Okaloosa Island, that traffic can continue just depending on the traffic in Destin. So most of that traffic, funny enough, is actually traffic backed up all the way from Destin. Now, if you are working in Fort Walton Beach or maybe heading up to Eglin Air Force Base, there are lots of routes for you to dodge this traffic as needed. But if you are headed from Fort Walton Beach or Marietta or Navar even, and you're going into Destin for the beaches or some shopping or just really whatever you're going over there for, expect that during peak tourist times, this traffic can get pretty hefty. So next up is the Okaloosa Island portion going all the way into Destin, which I just mentioned before. This can get busy on either side, no matter which direction you're heading. It is generally going to be worse going into Destin than it is leaving Destin, but because Destin's infrastructure is a little bit smoother as far as they've got a little bit faster speed going through there than a lot of Fort Walton does, they tend to go down Okaloosa Island and then sort of hit a wall and everybody's trying to cram onto the bridge. And then, of course, once you get into Destin, if you've ever been to Destin before, you know that the traffic can get pretty rough. Even though they did widen some of these roads and try to make it a little bit smoother and faster, it still causes quite a bit of traffic. And because Highway 98 is notorious for not having a lot of other routes, which there are a couple in Destin, it generally makes that traffic a little bit worse. And Destin can be busy in traffic everywhere. It's not just going into it or leaving it. It can be in the middle of it all the way until you get out into Sandestin. Please keep in mind that this is a 14,000 person fishing village that turns to 100,000 people overnight. And a lot of those people are taking their own vehicles or maybe they're Ubering around or what have you, but it does cause a lot of congestion. So just to give you one small example, the worst traffic I have personally seen in Destin took me about 2.5 hours to go maybe 8 miles. That is really worst case scenario. That's generally if there's a traffic accident or something going on up ahead. But it can take 1 hour to 2 hours pretty regularly, at least during tourist season. Now, if you live and work inside of Destin, there are a lot of ways to dodge this because Highway 98 just runs right through, and you can take Legion up, you can take Airport Road. I mean, there's a bunch of little other areas you can go to if you're working and playing there. Of course, you can use these if you're just trying to get around it as well, which a lot of us locals do. So just keep that in mind that there are routes that might save you a little bit of time. Now, once you start getting into the east side of Destin, over by the Commons and all of that, the road opens up and it goes to a 3 and even a 4 lane at certain points. So it really alleviates a lot of that traffic, at least until you start getting into Sandestin. So at about the point that you get to the Sandestin outlets, these are those huge outlets that have 100, 150 different stores, like an outdoor mall. Really cool area, great for shopping. At around that area is when you'll generally start seeing some of that traffic going by some of the resorts like Baytown Wharf and Sandestin Resort and things like that. Now, if you veer off the road to go through 30A, which is one of our very popular spots, it's a little bit more bougie and fun, family-oriented stuff like that. They've got the Highway 30A down there. Highway 30A can get a little bit busy, and it is so intermittent. It just really kind of depends on the type of year and which little city that you're in. 30A is made up of about, 15 or so different beaches with different personality types, and some of them get more congested than others, especially around the public beach accesses, because honestly, there's just not enough of the public beach accesses for the amount of people that visit 30A every year. I urge you that if you are out there at 30A or in Destin, those two in particular, make special care to watch for pedestrians. Both of those cities have quite a lot of crosswalks for people to go through. They do have the right-of-way, of course. In Destin, they've installed lights to kind of help because, people are getting hit. So hopefully that's alleviating some of it, but I just want to warn you guys in case you are out here to just keep your eyes peeled. All right, now that we're done with Highway 98, let's get off of that road and let's talk about some of the other roads that you might encounter depending on which city you choose when you move down here. Now, going back to the west side of where we kind of started around that Gulf Breeze area, we're going to see 281. 281 is a toll area, so you're already gonna have to pay to go in and out. You can actually get these cool sun passes. They're just little stickers you can put up on your windshield, or a little device you can stick in your trunk or on your, somewhere in your vehicle. And it will scan your vehicle and it will send you the bill there. They kind of vary based on which bridge that you're going through, but this bridge is what's going to lead into the Navar area and into Milton and Pace. Currently, that toll bridge is sitting at about $2.75 for that particular one. Of course, they're all a little bit different, so I'll try to make sure that I point those out at each one of the toll bridges that I mentioned. Next up is Highway 87, which runs into Navar. So that is the one that goes straight south from Milton right into the main portion of Navar. Earlier, it was technically kind of Gulf Breeze, Tiger Point that you get into with 281, but 87 is going to run right into Navar and just about let you hit Navar Beach. You are going to have to jump on 98 for just 100, 200 yards, something like that, before you go down to Navar Beach. So if you're headed from Milton to go to the beach, this is going to be your best route. 87 is not a toll bridge, so you don't have to worry about any money there. Now let's head over in between Fort Walton Beach and Niceville. Now we've got Highway 85. This is a very well-trafficked area because it goes all the way up into Crestview and Duke Field. For those of you that might get stationed out there or trying to work at any of these bases, that is where it is located. So 85 is the only direction to go up and down, and the surrounding areas are completely taken up by Eglin Air Force Base on what they own, so there's no real plans to have alternate routes outside of that. The majority of people that are going to be using 85 are either working or living in Crestview, or working or living around Eglin Air Force Base, or maybe even Hurlburt Field. So that causes traffic during major commute times. That 3:30 to 5:30 that I mentioned before that we have to deal with at Hurlburt, we have to deal with the same thing on 85. And you're generally only going to see this going north into Crestview, although you can get a little bit of traffic on 85 headed south, but that is generally right around the city. Once you get on the open road, if you will, people take off at, lightning speeds, so it starts breaking up that traffic pretty good. Just to give you an example, it would generally take most people about 25 minutes or so to get from South Crestview down to, let's say, the end of 85 when it runs right in between Niceville and Fort Walton. And of course, the same going up. But when those peak traffic times can hit, it will take that 25-minute drive into an hour to an hour and a half pretty regularly, especially during that 3:30 to 5:30 hour. Now let's get into 293, or what we call the Mid-Bay Bridge. The Mid-Bay Bridge is going to go right into Destin from Niceville, and of course, vice versa. So your quickest way to get into Destin from, let's say, Niceville, depending on where you're at in Freeport and Crestview, is generally going to be using this toll bridge. Now, this toll bridge is a little bit more expensive than the other toll bridge. This one currently sits at $4 per travel. That's each way. That $2.75 from the other toll bridge earlier, that is each way as well. Now, this toll bridge only takes about 7 minutes to get across, assuming no traffic, but the traffic on the toll bridge is few and far between. It's normally only happening when there's a pretty big backup, but it does happen for sure. But you're not normally going to be sitting in stop-still traffic on the bridge. You're generally going to get to one side of the bridge or the other before some of that traffic starts hitting you. Now, I've got two more to talk about, but while it's on my mind, if you are enjoying any part of this video, please make sure you hit that subscribe button. This is going to be a full overview. I know right now we're just going over roads, but they're that important to a lot of people, and we just don't talk about them enough. So if you hit that subscribe button and then ding that little bell afterwards, you will make sure that you never miss one of our videos so that you can be the most informed person on the Emerald Coast. Now, this next one I generally wouldn't mention in this video because, well, Freeport wasn't that big of a city, but now it is starting to grow and the infrastructure is outstanding. In fact, if it was closer to my office, I would consider moving there myself with everything that they're putting in. It is a great town. So this will be 331, and that's going to lead from Freeport all the way into basically like the 30A-ish area or Sandestin area, Santa Rosa Beach area, if you will. So it's a quick shot from that point to get to 30A, to get to Sandestin, Destin, etc., and then of course Panama City as well. And the very last of the ones that I want to touch on are going to be up in Crestview. This is going to be Highway 10 and Highway 90. This is going to go east and west. And this is why they call Crestview the hub city, because it is a hub and it's a lot of different intersections are hitting it. So these are great if you're trying to get to Walt Disney World or trying to go up to Mobile or, New Orleans or something like that. These are going to help you dodge a lot of that Highway 98 and coastal traffic that you're going to see, not just on the Emerald Coast, but even as you go into Gulf Shores, Alabama, or further on past Panama City Beach. Whew, okay, I know that was a lot, but let's go ahead and start moving into the best places to live according to niche.com. I wanted to make sure that we used a third-party site that wasn't my opinions before I get into my opinions. Don't worry, I'm going to give you guys that as well so you get more of a personal touch on that. But these are coming directly from niche.com. They grade it. They tell you kind of where it's at compared to other counties and cities in the country. So let's get into those. Again, starting on the west side and working our way east, we're going to start here in Gulf Breeze. Gulf Breeze is rated an A+ to live. That's actually really hard. As you're going to see as we go, this was not intentional. This was the first one, but it's hard to get an A+, and Gulf Breeze nailed it. It is also named the #1 best place to live near Pensacola. Gulf Breeze is a smaller town sitting at just 6,000 people in population. It was also rated number 18 of 321 as the best places to raise a family in Florida. It was also ranked number 21 as the best suburb to live in Florida and number 28 for the best place for schools in Florida. And then crime and safety is ranked as a B. Jobs is rating as a B+ with the median household income sitting at $107,000. Heading north just a little bit, we're going into PACE, which was ranked as a B+ overall. This one actually shocked me personally because I never would have thought it would have been ranked that high. PACE is sitting at about 26,000 people in population, and it is ranked number 16 of 381 for the best suburbs to buy a house in Florida. It was also ranked number 42 as the lowest cost to buy a house in Florida. And lastly, it ranked 45 in overall best places to buy a house in Florida. PACE ranked an A- in jobs, probably because of its proximity to Pensacola. It is essentially the closest suburb. It's just bumped right out of Pensacola. In fact, if you were driving through for the first time, you probably wouldn't even know you hit a new city. The median household income is $76,000 in PACE. Moving to PACE's neighbor Milton, Milton was ranked at a B+ overall. Milton has a much smaller population, so this is the, younger brother version of PACE, which is the younger brother version of Pensacola, at just 10,000 people in population. It was ranked number 47 in lowest cost of living in Florida, and ranked just 66 in the best suburb to buy in Florida. And lastly, it ranked 181 in the best suburbs with the best schools in Florida. Overall, the working grade was A- with a median household income of about $70,000. Now let's head south just a little bit into Navar. Navar ranks a B+. I actually would have liked to see Navar a little bit higher than this, but B+ is still a really solid rating. Navar's population is currently sitting at 39,000 people. It was ranked number 49 in best suburbs to buy a house in Florida in, and number 99 for best public schools in Florida. Lastly, it ranked 121 in lowest cost of living in Florida. The job rating was a B+ with the median household income of $98,000. Now we're going to head up north a little bit into Crestview, and let's discuss that. Crestview is ranked at a B overall, which is a little bit higher than I was expecting, being that it's, Crestview after all. And I know we give Crestview a lot of flack here, but we like it just fine. Crestview's got a population of 27,000 people. It ranks number 205 of best schools in Florida, and ranks 229 for most diversity, and ranks just 314 out of the lowest cost of living in Florida. Crestview has a C- for crime and safety. If you're wondering, by the way, why we don't have crime and safety on every single one of them, that's because niche.com didn't have crime and safety on all of them, and I didn't want to skew the numbers by going to different websites. Lastly, for jobs, it is ranked a B- with a median household income of $61,000. Now let's head south a little bit into where I've lived most of the time that I've lived here, or in one of the suburbs of Fort Walton Beach. Fort Walton Beach ranks an A- overall. Go Fort Walton. Fort Walton has 21,000 people in population. It is ranked 165 in best public schools. It is ranked 301 in best places to retire. And here's an accolade you haven't heard yet. It ranks number 385 in best places for young professionals. Fort Walton sits at a C for crime and safety. That one doesn't surprise me as much. It's definitely not unsafe here. A C is a solid score, probably about average across the country, but that doesn't surprise me with Fort Walton. And it ranks a B- for jobs with the median household income of $62,000. Now let's move over to Niceville, one of the nice places people really like to talk about. Niceville ranks as an A overall, and not even kind of surprising. If anything, I think it would have been an A+. Niceville boasts just 16,000 people, but you wouldn't know it when you drive through because there's so many amenities. It ranks number 91 out of best public schools, and ranks 136 for the best place to raise a family. And lastly, ranks 141 for the best place to buy a home. It's got a B+ for crime and safety, not surprising at all, and a B+ for working families with a median household income of $92,000. All right, we're going to get into the one everybody knows about, Destin. Destin actually ranks in A- overall, and it's got 14,000 people in it until the summer hits, and then it goes up to 100,000, but they don't live there, so they don't count for the population. Destin ranks number 79 in best public schools, number 112 in best places to retire, and ranks 149 in best places for young professionals. And Destin has a B for the work category with a median household income of $87,000. Then we go into Miramar Beach. Miramar Beach has an A- overall. And Miramar is surprisingly only a 9,000 person population. It just always feels a little bit more because it seems like there's always some sort of tourism going on there. It ranks number 96 out of best places to retire and number 148 in best public schools, and 359 for working professionals, young professionals. It is a B- for work and has an $82,000 median income. And last on our list is Freeport with a B rating overall. Freeport has just 6,000 people in population, but kind of as I mentioned before, you probably would know it, especially if you're in one of the major neighborhoods like Hammock Bay. And unfortunately, that is all the information they gave us on Freeport because, again, it's a little bit smaller and up and coming, so it didn't have all the data it needed yet. I also didn't have any data for any of the beach communities along 30A, but you can check out our sister channel at Life on 30A for some of AJ's input on that. Whew. All right, that was a mouthful, okay? But now let's get into some of the pros and cons. Now, these are going to be a little bit more of my personal opinion and the opinions of my clients and people that have worked with me in the past, friends, things like that. So this is going to be more, probably a little bit more helpful than just the basic stuff that niche.com would talk about. And it's going to give you a little personal account of each of these areas. Now, before we get into all the pros and cons, I've got to warn you, there are some pros and cons for everything here, and I'm going to say them now once, so I don't have to keep saying them in each of the areas. So one of the big pros are warmer temperature throughout the year on an average. I say that because one of the cons is hot summers. Our summers get pretty brutal out here. Then we also have high humidity, and we've got hurricanes, what we call the 3 H's. So just note that those 3 cons are going to be on all of them, and then of course the warmer temperatures throughout the year is also going to be on all of them. So let's go all the way back to Gulf Breeze, and let's start there again. So pros. First off, it kind of has a little bit of a small town feel. Not a real small town feel, but like that town that's near you that's, kind of populated, but it's still a little bit closer and friendlier. And Gulf Breeze has outstanding schools. It's not something that we generally talk about here. I try to be unbiased when it comes to schools and crime because it's not something that as a licensed real estate professional, I'm really supposed to go into that much. So I try to leave that to the other areas or to the other websites that give us that data. But if you look at it across the board, Gulf Breeze always ranks really high on schools. And the cost of living is kind of a pro in Gulf Breeze as well. For everything that it offers, being a coastal town on several different fronts, you've got the Gulf of Mexico, you've got the Sound, you've got a bay, right? So you've got lots of different areas to get on water right there on Gulf Breeze, a short distance to Pensacola, which is a bigger city with lots of amenities. The cost of living is surprisingly good, sitting at just 95.7% of the median average in the country. And just as I kind of alluded to, you've got Pensacola right there, which is the next pro. It is sort of Pensacola's front porch, if you will. Now let's talk about the cons. One of the big cons is that the housing is just a little bit overpriced over there, in my personal opinion, based on what you're getting. And I'll go over all of the prices for each of these cities right after this little set of the pros and cons, so don't worry, I'm not going to leave you hanging there. And one of the cons that I saw repeatedly when I was talking to different clients and looking on the internets was the diversity doesn't seem to be very strong there as it does in some of our other areas. Now, whether or not this is true is sort of up for debate, but that is a common theme that I kept hearing. And one of the biggest cons of Gulf Breeze in general is there's not really a whole lot of nightlife out here. I mean, sure, you've got the boardwalk down by the beach, and some of those restaurants will stay open, and there's a few, don't get me wrong, but as far as having a bigger nightclub scene, if that is something you're interested in, you're probably going to need to head into Pensacola to enjoy that. So one of the biggest pros of Pace, in my opinion, is the cost of living there. So Florida is already underneath the average for the country, which I know we get comments on this a lot. We get fight back on this a lot. It's just purely numbers, guys, just statistics. It is underneath the average, and Pace is even lower than that. So out of all of the places that we're talking about today, because I'm not adding in some of the real smaller towns like Defuniak and Jay, Florida, and some of those, Pace is going to be on the lower end for what you're getting. I think you get a little bit more bang for your buck in a couple of the other towns we're going to talk about, but Pace is very close. And I think one of the big pros of Pace is the location, not only being right bumped up against Pensacola, so you get all of the benefit of Pensacola, being a short drive down to Gulf Breeze Beach or Pensacola Beach, and Navar Beach makes it just great for location. You're about 20 to 30 minutes away from each one of those, just depending on where you're at in Pace and things like that. And Pace has one of my favorite things running through it, Blackwater River State Forest. So if you like going down a tube and, drinking a delicious cold Coca-Cola or whatever you're drinking and just enjoying the outdoor nature with this just refreshing water, you can go kayaking, you can go, like I said, tubing, you can go stand-up paddleboarding, you just go out there to fish, you just go out there to sit on one of the banks of the river. It really doesn't matter, but there are lots of options there, and I think that's a big pro of living in Pace. But Pace comes with a pretty big downfall, and that is that there's just not that much to do. I don't have a whole lot of cons for Pace outside of that. There's just not a lot inside of Pace itself. So if you want a lot of things within 10, 15 minutes of you, Pace might not be the best option for you. But if you're okay traveling 20 to 30, maybe even 40 minutes to go to some of the outlets and the places in Pensacola, maybe the big mall up there or anything like that, then Pace is an outstanding place because it just doesn't have a lot of cons outside of that. Now heading to its neighbor Milton on the right side. Milton is interesting to me because it's sort of up and coming as well. It's had a bad rap in the past. When I first moved here in like 2005, 2006, I remember people were like, Milton, there's nothing up there. But that is slowly starting to change. So the biggest pro of Milton is a small town feel. And this one truly is a small town feel. You're going to get a little bit of that in Pace as well, and a little bit of that in Gulf Breeze, as I kind of mentioned. But in Milton, it really is that small town feel. You're going to have a little bit more room between the houses generally. Of course, there are some new constructions and different neighborhoods that are a little bit closer, but for the most part, you're going to get a little bit larger of a plot of land to put your house on. And it's just going to have that small time feel to it. And of course, the outdoor recreation in Milton is outstanding. I already talked about Blackwater River, but that runs right through Milton as well. In fact, the place where I generally drop in my tube is in Milton. And there's also lots of hiking and everything else that comes with Blackwater River State Park. Next on my list for Milton is that it is extremely affordable, as you'll see when we get to the actual numbers of pricing of homes and things like that. What I really like about Milton too is it's one of the best bangs for your buck that you can get. A lot of times when somebody asks us what your best bang for your buck is along the Emerald Coast, sometimes we'll tell them Crestview and Milton, Defuniak Springs, like some of these. Milton is always inside of that conversation. And this is just a personal thing. I think this is more of a pro for me. Maybe it's not for you, but I really like all of the historic buildings out in Milton. It kind of gives me that, old-timey feel. It just feels a little bit warmer for some reason. And of course, the locals seem to be really friendly there in Milton as well. I can't tell you how many times I'm out showing homes or trying to, go sell a home, and I'm talking to a neighbor and they're just open and telling me everything that I ask them. Another pro of Milton is that they have above average schools. Now, they are not at the top of Florida by any means, but their schools are pretty solid, and their student to teacher ratio tends to follow suit as well. But there are 3 cons of Milton. Number one, limited housing. It's just not that big of a town, so if you are looking in there, you're not going to have as many options in Milton generally as you will in one of the other larger cities, but that's just nature of the business when you go with a smaller town. Number two is it's kind of car dependent. There really is no public transit going around that I'm aware of, so you are going to need your vehicle or a very powerful set of legs to get around town. And lastly, there's sort of an uneven job market. The downfall of having a smaller town like this is the stuff that's inside of the town isn't plentiful. There's not a lot of it. So working from home, working at a convenience store in the service industry, something like that. But anything outside of that, you're probably going to have to leave the town to do, which is about a 20 to 30 minute drive, depending on which town you need to go to. So headed south into Navar, let's go into the first pro. Now, if you've watched our videos for the past 3 or 4 years, we've been doing this for, 4 or 5 years now. We've been pushing videos to you guys. Great schools was not one of the pros that was on Navar's list up until about a year or two ago. Over the last 2 years, Navar has really changed up their school system quite a bit. I don't know the ins and outs. I don't know the politics behind it, but it is working because they are slowly getting ranked, and friends and past clients and stuff that I know that have kids in those schools are raving about them a lot more than they used to. In fact, used to be, little spoiler here, I would point everybody at Niceville. If they said schools are the most important thing, it was like Niceville all the way. And now Navar is actually starting to rank a little bit better than Niceville, which is very interesting to me. Navar is also very family friendly. It's sort of the family friendly version of Destin, in my opinion. Not as busy as Destin yet, but it is kind of going that direction. When I first moved here again in 2005 and 6, can never remember exactly which year it is. I need to go look at it one day. But point is, Navar was like a lot more barren than it is now. It wasn't barren. It wasn't empty, but it was definitely a lot slower. In fact, it used to be named Florida's best kept secret. And about 2-3 years ago, they ended up taking that down. But point of this is that you're still extremely family friendly. In fact, they even have a big park right off of the road to go down to Navar Bridge, or the bridge to go down Navar Beach. It has a splash pad and a ton of other things to do for kids right there on the water. So families are definitely important in Navar. You've also got very quick access to the beach, as you would with any coastal town. And one of my favorite things about Navar, though, is that the beach is less crowded generally. Now, if you go through the bridge and go straight through that sign and park somewhere there and walk out there, it is going to be a little bit more crowded. But when you compare it to the other areas that we have here, it's pretty barren. And you can go down Navar Beach and head all the way west until you find an area with like nobody in it. Like it's crazy, and it's a beautiful view. You can actually get all the way down to Pensacola Beach just from that road. And the last pro is that the cost of living for a beach town and the bang for your buck that you get in the process of is really, really, really good. A $400,000 home in Navar versus Fort Walton, even though they're both beach towns, in Navar it is a much bigger house. So let's get into some of the cons now. Number one, the tourism. Yes, it causes slowdowns. It causes some stuff. And surprisingly, the winter crowds can be a little bit hectic as well. The second con is it is close to the military bases. Now, I don't have this on all of the towns that are close to bases, but this is something that you're going to have to deal with if you are around Eglin Air Force Base or Hurlburt Field or even Duke Field, is that we've got gunships out here, and it is a big bomb testing center. So occasionally you're going to hear loud booms. It's not going to be like loud where you need to plug your ears or anything. You're just going to notice it. Most of the time, if you're in a building, you won't notice, but that's not true all the time. Sometimes when they're setting off something pretty big, everybody hears it. And it's funny because you'll actually see it all over the Facebook groups within 30 seconds of it happening. People are jumping on there. What was that? What's going on? Because a lot of people are transient. They don't live here or they haven't lived here very long, and it's the first time they've experienced it. And if I'm being completely honest on this con itself, it goes late into the night too. A lot of times they're getting done firing at 9 or 10 at night, especially for the gunships. Although that one's so light that you generally are not going to hear that when you're inside of your house. And it's just kind of a cool sound to hear. Con number 3 is black bears. There are black bears all over Navar. So just note that they're going to get into your trash. It's going to happen. They don't generally touch anybody, or even they're super afraid of humans. They're just going to run away as soon as they see you. But they'll get in your trash, and a lot of people don't like that. And the cost of living here in Navar is a little bit higher than the rest of Florida. Still underneath the median average, but still a little bit more expensive all in all. But it's sort of a trade-off because you're getting a larger, generally more upgraded house for the same dollar amount. And that's something that cost of living can't really pinpoint. All right, Crestview. Crestview pros. Number one, affordable home prices. As you'll see, as soon as we're done with this list, we're going to go to the home prices. And of course, the rents there are pretty solid too in comparison. Crestview also boasts pretty good schools. Nothing near as good as Navar or Niceville, but definitely nipping on their heels. And Crestview also has low crime rates in comparison to everything else. In general, our area is better than average for crime in general, but Crestview's even a little bit more safe. I think that's due to the heavy military presence. And Crestview does host two pretty cool pros, in my opinion. Number one is they have their own zoo, which Navar and Gulf Breeze do, which I didn't mention before. Probably should have. I'm mentioning it now. They got their own zoo, and they also have their own Panhandle Opry, which is kind of cool. And of course, Crestview being the hub city is close to I-10 and Highway 85, so you've got quick access to get east and west anywhere in the country. But con number one is, for those of you that like nightlife, it's not really here. At all. So, if you want a little bit of nightlife, you're probably going to have to travel for it. And a big con that we hear about Crestview all the time is there's just not much to do other than a few restaurants and, maybe swimming and going to the cinema. The infrastructure of what they have to do for, entertainment purposes is pretty low. But then again, everything else is pretty close by, so it might not be that big of a deal to a lot of people. And one of the biggest cons, in my opinion, is it will take you about 45 minutes to get to the nearest beach, depending on how you drive. Now, keep in mind that along 85 headed south, some people fly at 100 miles an hour, so, maybe you can make it there in 25 or 30 minutes. I'm not sure. All right, Fort Walton Beach, let's get into the pros there. Number one is the cost of living. Overall, the cost of living of everything, when you're just comparing not just housing prices, but the overall cost of living, is pretty good here. And we've got amazing beaches in super close proximity to us. Just a quick jump over onto Okaloosa Island. We have 7 public beach accesses on one side, and then about 2 or 3 on the other side, including Beasley State Park, which has huge pavilions and nice bathrooms so that you can actually go use the restroom instead of having to run out into the water every time you need to use it. Another great pro is the abundance of outdoor activities and recreational activities. And this is probably true of just about any of the coastal towns as well, but I didn't want to make every single one of them super, super long. But you've got the water right there. You've got all the water activities you can think of: snorkeling and paddle boarding, kayaking, jet skis, pontoons, fishing. You're just a few short miles into deep water as well. So lots of options there. And you can also just tool around on the bay if you're looking for a little bit more calm water, and you're just a short distance over to Crab Island as well. And Fort Walton Beach boasts a ton of community events. Everything from Billy Bowlegs, which is that one where they reenact pirates trying to take over Fort Walton and Destin, and they chased the mayor through the town, and the mayor finally had enough and turned around and fought them back out of town. It is a really cool thing. They do this whole reenactment, then they do a parade. Just make sure that if you're going out there with kids, you get them out of there before about 9 or 10 at night. It starts to get a little bit rowdy, in my opinion, but of course, it's your kids. I'm not going to tell you what to do, just offering a little bit of advice. But they've also got things like tacos and tequila, beer fest, brew fest, craft-a-thon. Those are 3 different beer-related events. The Landing always has something going on. There's concerts in the park once a week. There's fireworks. There's just a lot going on in downtown Fort Walton. But there are a couple of cons with Fort Walton. The first one is a job market. If you're not sitting in the defense sector, or your military, or a service, a waiter, bartender, in the service industry in general. Those are the 3 main big ones. Of course, you've got a little bit in the medical space, but outside of that, you're probably going to have to travel for more specialized work. And the tourist crowds are definitely a big con as well. Just trying to get through downtown to get into Destin or even to Okaloosa Island is sometimes very painful. In fact, where I live, a lot of times I make the choice to go over into Navar when I'm going to the beach. I'm about smack dab in the middle right now because I technically live in a little suburb of Fort Walton Beach, so it takes me about the same time either way, and I know generally Navar is going to be a bit easier to get through. And the last con for Fort Walton Beach is lack of big urban amenities. So, if you're looking for a very specialized thing, a specialized gym or specialized restaurant that serves like vegan, non-whole food, grass-fed biscuits or whatever, we just don't have a lot of that. Now, we have lots and lots of options for food. In fact, it seems like every other week there's like a new option popping up. But as far as very specialized things that you would find in a big urban area, we just don't have it as much. Now let's get into Niceville. Niceville's big pro, in my opinion, is that their crime rate is 10% of the state average. It is very, very low in crime. And it is probably one of the most family-friendly towns in our area. I would pit it up against Navar just about any day, and maybe up against 30A as well, but I think 30A has some distinct advantages also when it comes to family friendliness. And the schools are outstanding as well. I've already touched on that a few times, so I'm not going to go into it too much more. And of course, Niceville, with where it's located, has access to a lot of the outdoor activities that we've already mentioned. Not just the water ones, but also hiking nearby, or let's call it trail walking, because we are in Florida after all. We don't have a whole lot of hiking and elevation. Found that out the hard way when I went to Vermont and New York to go hiking. It is a way different experience. And Niceville has very interesting natural surroundings. So when they built it, they didn't just barrel through everything and take everything down. So a lot of these old trees, 300, 400, 500-year-old trees, are still sitting on people's lots today. And lastly, for pros for Niceville is their healthcare. There are a lot of healthcare options right here in Niceville. But that comes with a few cons. Number one is the subdued pace of living here in Niceville. It is a little bit slower. It is a little bit more subdued. You just have to know that going into it. And just like a lot of the other towns that are near Eglin Air Force Base and Hurlburt Field is, you're going to have to deal with some of the jet noise. In Niceville in particular, because of where the airport is located, a lot of times they're taking off right over Valparaiso, which is a suburb of Niceville. And then you're hearing those. And the jets we have out here are extremely loud. Another con of Niceville is the cost of living. In my personal opinion on this, the cost of living in Niceville is a little bit out of line for where it should be for what it offers. That's what it feels like to me. But I also don't find some of those same things important, like the family friendliness and the healthcare and things like that. I don't find important. To a lot of my families that have moved up there, they do find it important, and they're okay spending that little bit of extra in order to live there. And as you've heard a few times, is the nightlife. You're not going to really find it here in Niceville. You're going to have to go into Fort Walton Beach downtown, Destin, 30A, Miramar, any of those areas to get some good nightlife. Whew. All right, let's move into Destin pros and cons. Location. Biggest pro of Destin, location. It is so quick to get to everything. You've got the beaches. You've got all of the things that you can do here in Destin. So the location has to be the number one pro. And then, of course, with that great location comes great amenities. So whether you're going out at the boardwalk, which, by the way, we've got a great harbor walk video. We're going to post it right here. People seem to really like it. It's literally me and AJ kind of walking through and showing you the different restaurants and things to do and the jet skis and all of that. But yeah, you can literally walk the boardwalk, rent a jet ski for an hour or two, come back, park it, jump over to Margaritaville, have a delicious marg, go grab some, seafood over at AJ's. Like, there's just a lot to do right in this little area. And that's just one small part of Destin. We're not even talking about the commons. We're not even talking about all the shopping out there. There's just a lot to do. And then, of course, all the water activities like jet skiing or renting a boat or going on a dolphin cruise, whale watching cruise, going out and doing a, 4-hour fishing trip or 9-hour fishing trip. These are all options. And they've even got some sunset cruises, which are pretty cool. And last pro on our list for Destin is a public school system is surprisingly good for a tourist town. And there's a pretty big con. The biggest con that I can think of is the cost of living. Destin's cost of living is 18% higher than the national average. So this is nothing compared to like South Florida or anything like that, but it is high for our area. And the housing costs are 62% higher. The same house that you're getting in Fort Walton Beach, let's say, just 15-minute drive away, is going to be considerably more than what you're going to get into Destin. And a really big con of Destin is the traffic. We've already hit on this pretty heavily when we were talking about the different roads, but the traffic in Destin can be absolutely brutal. And lastly, Destin doesn't have any public transportation. I mean, they got a couple of things, but for the most part, you're going to need a vehicle or, again, those strong legs to keep you walking around. Moving east to Destin's neighbor, Miramar Beach. Let's get into it. Miramar Beach boasts great location. It is a coastal town, and it has a lot of condo options right there on the water. So for those of you looking for a condo, this is definitely a place I would keep on your radar. And because it's right there on the water, most of these condos have amazing beach views that you can get for a fairly decent price, especially if you're okay being in one of the larger towers. Miramar Beach also has a great location. It's right down the road from Destin. It's got a lot of stuff to do inside of Miramar Beach and Destin, a short drive over into 30A, Panama City, even Pensacola if you wanted to go that far. And Miramar boasts an active lifestyle. You'll see a lot of people riding their bikes and running on the trails and, pushing a stroller while running and, the water stuff and snorkeling and, just a ton of activities to keep you active. And one really cool thing a lot of people don't know about Miramar is it's very heavy with parks. It's actually got 35 of them at least that I was able to find. Now let's get into some of the cons of Miramar Beach. Number one, the beaches. They get crowded. When you put a tower of 1,000 condos right on the beach, those people are going to that beach. So just note that the beaches in Miramar are going to be a little bit more crowded. And the cost of living in Miramar is not going to help their cause either, with it being 25% higher than the national average. And depending on who you talk to, another con of Miramar is the lack of entertainment. This one surprises me a little bit, but I did see this quite a lot when I was doing my research. It seems to me like they've got a pretty good amount of entertainment, but I may be blending a little bit of Destin in there, a little bit of Destin in there, a little bit of, Santa Rosa Beach. Maybe my lines are a little bit blurred, but it seems like there's a decent amount enough to do. But it is a smaller population, so maybe that's where that came from. All right, let's get into Freeport's pros and cons, with the first pro being the location is actually pretty outstanding. So you're not a coastal town, I'll give you that, but it's just 25 minutes to Grayton Beach, which would be the nearest public beach access. You're also a very quick drive with no traffic, or shouldn't have very much traffic if you don't go along 98 and just go straight east into Panama City Beach. And the cost of living in Freeport is outstanding. I couldn't find actual numbers to see how far it was underneath the median average, but as you'll see with housing prices in the next section, Freeport is a great place to live for cost of living. And on top of that, the HOA fees there are very reasonable for what you're getting if you decide to live in an HOA town. And the HOA fees are fairly reasonable as well should you decide to live in an HOA community like Hammock Bay. I keep mentioning Hammock Bay because it is kind of the premier neighborhood over there. Like, it's huge, it's got its own stuff. I've done videos on it before, so make sure you guys go and watch those. And the crime rate in Freeport is so low, it's almost negligible. I'm going to look down at my notes here for a second. We've got a crime rate of 3 per 1,000 residents, which is 87% lower than most communities in Florida. And the schools are great in Freeport as well. And lastly on the pro list is traffic, or should I say lack thereof traffic. Traffic's not really a thing in Freeport right now. It's still a small town and the infrastructure is good, and they're prepping for it to be a bigger town, so hopefully the infrastructure will always stay that way so that we don't have too much of a traffic problem down the road. But the cons, there are cons with Freeport. I know that was a lot of pros. There's probably more pros on the Freeport list than anything, but it really is an up and coming. Like, they're doing a really good job. I'm very impressed. But there are some cons to note. Number one, with it being up and coming, that means it's a small size, and with small size comes problems or issues, cons, if you will. So there isn't much to do, and the entertainment is generally lower as well. So if you're trying to move to Freeport with lots of attractions or for lots of attractions and things to do, you'll have some, don't get me wrong, especially like in the Hammock Bay area with the big theater that they have, the outdoor theater and the brewery and the store, the sports complex. They have all of these in one neighborhood, by the way. But outside of that, you're going to have to travel to go to, shopping and the beaches and things like that. All right, let's move to Santa Rosa Beach, which I'm going to separate Santa Rosa Beach and 30A. Technically, Santa Rosa Beach encompasses 30A. 30A is a kind of a subset or sub-community of it, but I'm going to separate them because they are two completely different monsters. So Santa Rosa Beach pros. Beaches. It's a coastal town just like all the other ones. I probably should have put that one in the pre-one. Like, if it's a coastal town, there's beaches, but I wanted to make sure you guys understood which ones were coastal and which were not, which I know we've got, graphics and stuff showing up, but just wanted to make it clear for you. One of the cool things about Santa Rosa Beach is the activities that they have. So, trail biking, trail walking, just general biking, things like that. So there's a lot of those outdoor activities to do. And there are 3 pretty big parks here at Santa Rosa Beach. So we've got Eden Garden State Park, we've got Topsail Hill Preserve Trail, or State Park, and Point Washington State Forest as well. And last on the pros list for Santa Rosa Beach is the crime. It is considerably lower over here in Santa Rosa as well. But the first con on our list is Cost of living. Unfortunately, it is 12% more expensive to live in Santa Rosa Beach than it is in the rest of the country. And honestly, that's really the only con I could kind of think of. Right now, Santa Rosa Beach is almost an empty slate. There's so much extra land to do stuff with that they're kind of building it how they want, and it's turning out pretty well so far. All right, last one on our list, 30A, 30 Alpha. If you guys haven't heard of 30A, it's amazing. So it's a ton of different little beach communities that I absolutely adore because they change personality as you drive. You can literally be driving and you'll know as soon as you enter into Alice Beach or Watercolor or any of the other towns that we're going to be talking about. So first pro of 30A, and probably the one I like the most, is its laid back vibes. It's just so cool how laid back they are over at 30A. Now, some of them are more, I guess, less laid back than others, but the overall vibe of each of the communities is sort of a laid back feel. And there are year-round activities to do in 30A, which is why so many people buy second homes, not just to rent them out and make money while they're out there or while they're not there, but also to come visit them because year-round there's generally stuff to do in the 30A area. And there's a pretty abundant amount of life and nature out there. So there's parks and stuff running through, big ones too, trails and jeep trails and hiking trails and I keep saying hiking, walking trails, right? So lots of that. And then of course, all the water activities that you would expect out of beach towns. And there are also several celebrities that are out there. You've got Jerry Jones, Britney Spears, Tom Cruise, a country singer. One of my friends met one time. I can't think of his name. It's like right on the tip of my tongue. I should have looked it up, put it in my notes, but lots of cool little celebrities. Not like that's really a pro. I mean, I guess if you ran into one of them, that would be kind of cool, but it did come up in my list, so I decided to throw it on here for some fun. Now, the biggest con of 30A is the cost of living. The cost of living is just a lot higher there, and not just the housing either. Even the restaurants and the places that you're going to go to hang out are a little bit more expensive. It's namely the restaurants, let's be completely honest, and some of the shopping, because I've got very specialty stores and stuff out there and boutiques. So it does cost a little bit more to live out there, but you're kind of getting a lot for that cost. So you've got to kind of weigh the pros and cons, no pun intended. So for the most part, all of the other cost of living items, gas, utilities, groceries, electricity, just everything is going to be about the same. The only big difference is some of the restaurants it's not even a big difference. Some of the difference is going to be the restaurant prices and a little bit of the shopping. But for the most part, everything else is the same. Everything can be reached to within about an hour and a half of each other. So we're not seeing big fluctuations there. But where we do see big fluctuations is in housing prices. Now, the numbers I'm going to go over with you are 100% from active and current sales that are going on. Okay, so this is not from some website. A lot of the websites for cost of living are behind. I know this because we do a lot of cost of living videos on here, which, by the way, if you would like to know cost of living based on a very specific town and you want to get super detailed, super granular, we will have playlists down below in the description. Hit the See More button and you'll see a bunch of links down there, including our social and things like that, which you guys are more than welcome to follow. But it will have playlists in there for each of the towns. So if you heard something here today that you're like, hey, I want to learn more about that city, we've got playlists specifically for you, including the cost of living that will break it down in a very granular way to like, hey, here's what you can expect to pay in groceries if you eat this way or this way and all of that. Like, it's really, really detailed, so it will help you out. Or, of course, if you have any questions in particular that maybe the videos don't answer, or you just don't want to wait for the video, all of my information will pop up on the screen here for a moment. It will also be at the beginning of the video, the end of the video, and down below in all of our videos. So you can always reach out to us with these questions. You can call me, text me, throw a carrier pigeons, email me, sign up on our website, find us on Google, search our hundreds of 5-star reviews on Google, and decide from there what you want. It doesn't matter. There's lots of ways to get a hold of us. I want to make it as easy as possible for you guys. So if you do have a direct question, you can do that, or of course, comment down below. Now, let's get into these cost of living prices. Every number that I'm using is going to be a median price, okay? So there is a difference between median and average. I like to use a median because it gets rid of the outliers. The $110,000 trailer that sold, bringing down the prices and misleading you, or the $8 million property on the water that just sold that are raising the prices and misleading you. So I'm trying to eliminate that. So that's what I'm using for all of these numbers. So let's start with Gulf Breeze. Gulf Breeze has a median home price of $539,000. Pace is sitting at $389,000. Milton is sitting at just $304,000. And Navar is sitting at $449,000. And by the way, if you'd like a list on any active properties for any of these cities, all you have to do is message us. We won't even bug you too hard if you don't want us to. And just let us know what cities you're looking in, and we can get that set up for you. Then moving on over into Crestview at $315,000. So not the least expensive, but pretty close. Right now, currently Milton has the least expensive price right now of all the ones I've mentioned. So getting on into Fort Walton Beach, we've got a median price of $320,000. Now I want to make something clear here. So we've got Crestview at $315 and Fort Walton at $320, but the difference in the actual house is going to vary dramatically at that price. A $320,000 home in Crestview is going to be probably a 3, maybe even a 4-bed, 2-bath, generally a brick exterior at this price point. And it's going to be a little bit upgraded, but not upgraded to the teeth, so LVP flooring, maybe the countertops are not marble, maybe they're just quartz, maybe they're, my mind is going blank right now, but it won't be the newest thing, but generally just one step down. Whereas in Fort Walton Beach, generally going to get a little bit smaller of a home, sometimes maybe even in an older home in the 60s or 70s, so that ranch style, it's like a big rectangle, right? With closed off rooms, things like that. So the quality of the properties themselves make a big difference too. Even though the median price might be the same, you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck in Crestview than you would in Fort Walton, for instance. Then moving on into Niceville at $520,000. So kind of a big price point for what you're getting there. And that's one of the complaints that a lot of people have with Niceville is it seems like the prices are a little bit higher than where they should be, as I mentioned earlier. Then we've got Destin at a whopping $655,000, which is still not near as high as Miramar Beach's average price or median price point of $700,000. Then we head a little bit north into Freeport, and the median price there is $380,000, which you think, well, that's more expensive than Crestview and Fort Walton and a few of the other ones I mentioned. Yes, but generally you're getting a nicer home out there. The upgrades will be a little bit better. The size will be a little bit better. The amenities a little bit better. So keep that in mind. This doesn't tell the whole picture. Now, if we go down to Santa Rosa Beach and exclude 30A, I need to do that because it will inflate these numbers very high. Santa Rosa Beach sits at a median price point of $762,000 without 30A in it. Now, this is exactly why I took 30A out. Let's get into 30A. So 30A East will be 1.45 million median. It's just the median. And then on the west side, you're looking at 1.15. The further you go east, typically the more expensive, although there's, Alice Beach, it's a little bit more expensive, and Rosemary Beach that isn't necessarily all the way at the end. All right, that is the whole overview of the entire Emerald Coast. If you were on the fence about where to go or what direction to point your research in, I'm sincerely hoping that this helped you. If it did, please put a comment down below and let me know so that I know to do more videos like this, or smash that like button. Just give me some indicator that these are the kind of videos you guys want. I really appreciate you guys staying here with me. For those of you that made it all the way into the end, I really appreciate you. I know this was a lot of information. It's kind of like drinking from a fire hose, but I sincerely hope it was helpful. And as always, if you guys have any questions, all of my information will pop up on the screen. We are a real estate team first. We handle everything from Pensacola to Panama City Beach, and of course, everything in between. And I know we didn't talk about Pensacola, Panama City Beach. This was a long enough video as it is, so I'm gonna save those for separate videos because there's some extra things I wanna talk about in there. If you guys have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me, and I will see you guys in the next one.